we need a fighter like President Trump for the long road.
Give me one criticism of the 100 days so far.
Boy, I really don't see any criticism. And I'm not saying that because I know him and I like him. I'm saying.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So glad you're here for this one. Alright, so Piers Morgan brought together a panel to grade the first 100 days, and things got intense. You've got Tim Pool, Carrie Lake, Cenk Uygur, and Batya Ungar-Sargon all going back and forth. But here's where it gets wild. Piers asks Carrie Lake to name just one criticism, and what happens next is absolutely jaw-dropping. Then Cenk brings up polling data that even includes Republicans calling the administration dangerous, and the whole conversation explodes from there. You're definitely going to want to stick around because the way this unfolds is something you need to see for yourself. And hey, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from today. I love seeing where everyone's watching. All right, let's get into it.
A regular grade, I guess, a B+. You know, what I would say is the Doge firings, the getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse have been beyond my expectations. I'm absolutely happy with that. Selective tariffs, I'm a huge fan and have been a huge fan for a while. I do think universal tariffs, I'm very skeptical on, but I did vote for the man, and I do believe that it's been substantially better than what we've seen with Biden by miles. Deportation, I think, is going fairly well. I think a lot of the concerns and criticisms are overhyped, but we'll see. I think overall pretty good.
I mean, would you have said the same thing if Joe Biden had had this first 100 days, which by any kind of yardstick have been pretty chaotic, a lot of changing, spinning plates, and a tariff war that so far has caused a lot of short-term damage to the US economy? In all honesty, would you have said the same analysis if it was Biden?
Probably not. I do think it's fair to point out that we're all going to be biased in some regard or another. And Donald Trump's administration, his worldview and his policies more align with me morally. And I think that's a big issue for most people. That being said, when Joe Biden came out and he was fighting against overdraft fees, I praised it. If Joe Biden had come out and said, we're going to put tariffs in these certain areas, in fact, I never criticized him on any of the tariffs he did. I think the issue is largely criticize where criticism is due and praise where praise is due. Donald Trump has certainly made some errors. He has this gaffe going around from ABC where he appears to genuinely believe Abrego Garcia actually had MS-13 written on his hand, which is incorrect. But, you know, if he's going to make mistakes, we accept those. If he's going to advance policies that are in line with the majority of Americans' moral views, or at least what I support, then I'm going to be substantially more forgiving on his errors than I would be for someone like Joe Biden, who represented open borders, trans surgeries for children, and other policies which I found to be destructive.
All right, Carrie Lake, you're very pro-Trump. We know that. You know, I like Donald Trump personally. I speak to him quite regularly. I've got to say, though, this is a massive throw of the dice. He's come back into the White House. He's thrown everything, including the kitchen sink, up in the air. He has turned all establishment norms on their head. And right now, he's got very poor approval ratings and a really in shock US economy that doesn't quite know what it's going to do or how this all plays out. It's a roll of the dice, isn't it? Because at some stage, this has to work. If it doesn't work, then come the midterms, the Republicans are going to be in big trouble.
Well, let me start by saying I'm pro-America, and this is why I love President Trump and I love his agenda, because he has put our country first. I disagree with you. I think you're talking about some really bogus polling. I know how polling works. I ran for office twice. Trust me, I know how polling works. You can make a poll say anything. And it's typical for the mainstream media to try to downplay all of the accomplishments of President Trump and his incredible administration. He has had no choice but to go in like a bull in a china shop and move quickly. We were on the verge, Pierce, of losing our country after 4 abysmal years of Joe Biden. The inflation was out of control. The border was wide open. People were pouring in, including gangbangers like this guy that the fake news media is acting like is the second coming, this Kilmore guy. And they're going to bat for him. They don't give a damn about the American people. And so President Trump has had to act and move quickly. I'm glad he has, and he has overwhelming support. Even Tim talked about what he did with and what he is continuing to do with Doge, coming in and cleaning out these agencies, pulling back, slimming down the bureaucracy. It has to be done or we will lose our country. We're not out of the woods just yet. And thank God for President Trump. Joe Biden had 100 excuses for why we had inflation, the open border, high gas prices, all kinds of problems. He had 100 excuses. President Trump simply needed 100 days to get things turned around. I can't wait for the next 100 days. Frankly, I wish we could have him for the next, 10,000 days because
This is what people need to understand about conservative media right now. When Tim Pool gets asked if he would judge a Democratic president the same way for this level of chaos, you know what he says? He straight up admits it. Tim said this: Donald Trump's administration, his worldview, and his policies more align with me morally. And then he doubles down and says, I'm going to be a substantially more forgiving on his errors. That's the whole game right there. He's telling you that he has different standards based on WHO is doing something, not what is being done. That's not principles. That's partisanship. And look, I actually respect Tim for being honest about it, because at least he's not pretending. But this is exactly why so many Americans feel gaslit right now. Because when you have one set of rules for your team and another set for everyone else, you're not actually standing for anything. You're just cheerleading. And the problem is, this creates an environment where there's no accountability. When Carrie Lake comes on and says things like, we were on the verge of losing our country after 4 abysmal years, she's rewriting history in real time. The administration she's talking about handed over an economy with declining unemployment and inflation that was manageable compared to global standards. But here's what really gets me. When she says President Trump simply needed a 100 days to get things turned around, she's setting up this narrative where any criticism is premature and any failure can be blamed on the previous guy. That's a rhetorical shield. It means nothing he does can be judged on its own merits because there's always an excuse ready.
We need a fighter like President Trump for the long road.
Give me one criticism of the 100 days so far.
I really don't see any criticism. And I'm not saying that because I know him and I like him. I'm saying that because he's done a great job. I mean, he's a human being. Every once in a while, you might make a tiny misstep. I can't off the top of my head.
Pretend he's Joe Biden for a minute and try that, answer that question again.
Well, you know what? Honestly, if he was doing the things Joe Biden did, if President Trump let inflation go through the roof, if President Trump opened up the borders and allowed children to be trafficked, fentanyl to be trafficked in, if President Trump was trying to start up wars rather than bring about peace, I would be very critical of him. Trust me. I'm very realistic. And if he were doing things that were dumb and stupid, I would be all over it, calling it dumb and stupid. He's doing things that are strong, that are brilliant, and that I believe will help restore America and return us to our greatness.
All right, well, Cenk Uygur, welcome to Uncensored. You're laughing, I suspect, not in a way that indicates fulsome support for what Ms. Lake was just saying.
No, not fulsome support at all. All right, so first, usually, obviously we're always fair, right? So in the beginning, he comes out and he closed the border, and that's really popular. That's what people elected him for. He does a lot of executive orders. Now, a lot of those in the beginning, very beginning, I disagreed with instantly, but some of the later ones were more disastrous, but it looked like there was action being taken. So. And it showed in his polls. He'd already won the popular vote, and then he added to that lead in his polling. And that's back when, of course, Republicans believed in polling, when he was above 50% and popular, et cetera. And then what did he do? He pulled a Trump. He can't help himself. He loves his authoritarian tendencies, to put it mildly. He loves testing the limits of what he could do. He started talking about third term, started saying we're not doing due process, we're not listening to the courts, et cetera. And now he's lost people on all sides, the wild, outrageous tariffs. And, obviously, Batya and Kari and I had a debate about that, and I was right and they were wrong. And so I'm curious to see if they'll admit that now, because I said, of course, Trump will pull back the global tariffs. They were nuclear and ridiculous. And he pulled them back, 2 days after we had that debate? So now he's made a giant mess of it. I mean, everyone from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Patrick Bet-David, Dave Portnoy, Joe Rogan, and yesterday Alex Jones, all saying, what's going on here? even they didn't sign up for violating the Constitution and due process and all of that, let alone the trillions of dollars he's bled out of the market by having no idea how to handle things economically. So he started out strong in the beginning for a couple of days, and then the rest has now just been a total debacle and disaster. And Piers, I'm always amused by both sides, and you've seen me call out both sides live as it's happening, when the Democrats were like, oh, Joe Biden's polling's in the 30s, but I bet it bounces back to the 60s, or polling doesn't matter. Whenever they're down, always polling doesn't matter, or polling is fake. And now when Trump is in the 39, 40% range, all of a sudden, here's Carrie Lake telling us that polling doesn't matter or it isn't real. It's real. It's not perfect, but it's real. Trump is badly, badly hurt. I mean, geez, one last fact. 52% in a recent poll of Americans said that he was a, quote, a dangerous dictator looking to take away American democracy, including 56% of independents and a shockingly high 17% of Republicans think he's a dangerous dictator. You really can't handle it any worse than that.
Oh, this moment right here. Piers asks Carrie Lake directly, give me one criticism of the 100 days so far, just one, and watch what happens. She says, I really don't see any criticism, not a single thing. And when Piers pushes her and basically says, pretend it's someone else and try again, she still can't do it. That tells you everything about the state of political discourse on one side right now. When you cannot acknowledge a single mistake or misstep from your preferred leader, you've stopped being a political analyst and you've become a propagandist, because every leader makes mistakes. Every administration has trade-offs and downsides. That's just reality. But what makes this even more damaging is what Cenk Uygur brings up next. He lists off names and says this: everyone from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Patrick Bet-David, Dave Portnoy, Joe Rogan, and yesterday Alex Jones. These are people who are all in the conservative ecosystem, and even they are raising red flags about constitutional concerns and economic chaos. When your own ideological allies start stepping back and saying, wait, this isn't what we signed up for, that should be a massive warning sign. And then Cenk drops the polling data. He says 52% in a recent poll said of Americans said that he was a, quote, a dangerous dictator. That includes 56% of independents and, this is the kicker, 17% of Republicans. When nearly 1 in 5 people from your own party think you're a dangerous dictator, that's not a messaging problem. That's a governing problem. And the fact that Carrie Lake's response to all of this is just to dismiss polling entirely and say it's fake, that's the same playbook authoritarians use. Discredit the data when it doesn't support you.
Yeah, you know, the stats tell a story. They're not always completely infallible, but they tell a story. You know, his approval rating, Trump, peaked at 52%, which was an incredible figure, given that it was down at 34% when he left office in 2021. But now it's slid back to 44%, which is an extremely rapid fall. And it's linked in almost entirely to what's going on with the economy. Are you entirely confident that his strategy here is A, one that he planned exactly how it's rolled out, and B, that it's working how he intended it?
I don't really know about his intentions. Unlike you, Piers, I don't talk to him regularly. But I can tell you that I think it's going very, very well. I know the polling is bad. He started out with a large portion of the country who really, really dislikes him. He managed to convince a lot of independents and a lot of Democrats to give him a shot and to vote for him. But that doesn't mean that he convinced people to like him. He's a very polarizing person, just his personality. But I think when you look at the agenda, he has tailor-made this agenda for the new base of the GOP, which is the working class. And when you talk to working class Americans, which I do all the time, and I hear from hundreds, if not thousands of them on a regular basis, they love this. They feel like this is exactly what they voted for. The situation with China was unsustainable. It made the elites in this country very, very wealthy, which is why elites on the left and on the right are furious at him and why Wall Street is furious at him. But working class people see this as him turning the boat around and once again prioritizing American prosperity rather than what we've had, which is the pillaging of the middle class by the elites.
Here's where the cracks really show. Piers brings up the numbers and says this: his approval rating peaked at 52%, but now it slid back to 44%. That's a massive drop in just weeks. and he's linking it directly to the economic chaos from the tariff strategy. Then he asks Batya the most important question: are you entirely confident that his strategy here is one that he planned exactly how it's rolled out? And Batya's answer, she says, I don't really know about his intentions. Let that sink in. Even the people defending this strategy admit they don't actually know if this was the plan or if it's just damage control after things spiraled. That's terrifying, because if the chaos is intentional, that's one problem. But if it's not intentional, and this is genuinely what incompetence looks like at the executive level, that's even worse. Then Batya pivots to this idea that the working class loves it. She says, they love this, they feel like this is exactly what they voted for. But here's the thing. Working class Americans are the ones who are going to feel the pain of price increases the most. They're the ones living paycheck to paycheck who can't absorb a sudden spike in costs for basic goods. So when you implement a sweeping tariff strategy that causes market instability and consumer price hikes, you're gambling with the livelihoods of the exact people you claim to represent, and hoping that they'll just trust the process and wait it out. But what happens if it doesn't work? What happens if 6 months from now prices are higher, shelves are emptier, and the economy is in worse shape? You can't just walk that back and say, oops, our bad. The issue here is that when you surround yourself with people who refuse to criticize you, you lose the ability to course correct, and that's dangerous for everyone. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.